Namaste. Francois Gautier, who's my guest here in Princeton in our studio, needs no introduction. He was a French journalist covering India many decades ago, fell in love with India, relocated to India, got married and settled there, and has done some amazing work. Welcome.
Thank you.
We've had a few discussions before, so our audience already knows you. What do you think has been the positive work done by the government in the past 5 years? What do you think their shortfalls are? What do you think the issues are in this election that would guide or should guide voters?
It's a very crucial election, and I think the whole future of India as a superpower, as an embodiment of all what the great seers, Swami Vivekananda, Sri Aurobindo, so many of them said that India becomes a spiritual leader of the world. So this election will decide whether India or not will become not only the spiritual leader of the world, but an economic superpower, a political superpower, a nuclear superpower, a military superpower, a superpower. So these elections are very crucial. Mr. Modi has shown in 5 years that if you do hard work, if you're sincere, if you're devoted to your country, if you sleep 5 hours a night, you can do excellent, extraordinary work. So that has been the positive side.
What are some examples of this excellent work?
The reform that he has set, that nobody dared to do before him, like the demonetization, the GST, which is a difficult but needed reform, that there's a uniform tax all over India, like there is in my country. In France, we have a TVA which is no more extravagant than in India. It's been accepted, it is used all the time. But of course, India is a huge country, it's a complicated country. And another factor which nobody talks about, Indians have been used to cheat for many centuries because they were persecuted, because they were overtaxed. So this has become something in the genes of India.
Yeah, the system was unfair,
right,
because it was foreign imposed. Before the British were the Mughals. Correct. And so the way to survive was to do jugaad of the system, means you improvise your way around it. So cheating became a way of life.
No, even Indira Gandhi, it taxed, it is said that nearly 80% of your income was taxed under Indira Gandhi. So,
yes.
So people continued cheating after 1947. So cheating has become a way of life, and this is one of the obstacles that Mr. Modi met, and I don't think he really expected it, that people continue to cheat in India, and that is creating a problem, that is creating a backlash against him.
Suppose he gets elected, suppose Modi wins adequately to form a government on his own or with some very friendly allies so that he can do what he wants. What should Modi do starting the day he gets elected if you were giving him advice?
For me, the first reform is political and constitutional, because as soon as you're elected in India, you have an eye on the next election. There are too many elections in India. They cost too much money. They use too much manpower. It's a waste of time.
So I have proposed, and I want your reaction, a presidential system like the US.
Yes.
So it's stable.
Yes.
You have the parliament does not elect the president. People elect the president directly, and people elect a parliament separately.
Right.
And also, you needn't have all of these at the same time. You could have some parliament people being elected every, stagger it. So it's not like one day the whole government is different.
Sure. Or you can have a French system, a president who is elected and who chooses his prime minister among the majority party. That's also a system that works well and that doesn't, call for so many elections. In India, you have governors, and the president and the vice president who have no power at all. Except a few constitutional powers. And cost a lot of money and use a lot of manpower, and they're good people. The president is a good man, the vice president is a good person, and they are locked in, VVIP security. The vice president came for some programs, there's so much protocol, and he's an RSS guy, he's a simple guy, So I asked him, but why is there so much protocol? We have to get up when you come and say this and say that and not say this, and nobody can enter the room where you're going, And he said, there's a book. No, it's not the green book, it's some other book or black book, that the Congress has made again, and I'm bound by it. Unless, there is some, big change, and I am bound by it. So this has to go. This has to go. It's not possible. The governors, are just puppets, just puppets. So it's still a system borrowed from the British with that huge, palace in Delhi for the for the president, that employs 1,000 people just to maintain it. It's a legacy of the British. So it needs to be reformed, and Mr. Modi needs the willpower to do it, and also the majority to do it. So that's a very important reform. Second reform, I would say, maybe even more important, education. You are the education system in India, and after 5 years of the BJP, there is no difference. Just produces Western clones, who are taught, Western values and Western mathematics.
For that, I think there was no excuse, because a good, efficient, enterprising HRD minister could have done it.
No excuse.
Without bothering the Prime Minister.
No, but he probably didn't have the backing of his Prime Minister. I mean, Mr. Javadekar is a good man. He's a fairly
nice
humble man.
Yes, he's a good human being.
He's a fairly good.
But hasn't produced results.
No, but I don't think he had the backing of his Prime Minister to do the radical changes that would have triggered a massive revolt, as when Mr. Murli Manohar Joshi tried to introduce the singing of Vande Mataram. You remember?
Yes.
And that was so long ago,
It was called saffronization.
Yes.
That's when the term started.
And it was a good reform, It was. So he didn't have the backing of his Prime Minister, I think. That's the main problem.
But at least they could have developed the new textbooks pending acceptance.
You were involved in that?
No, I was not involved. I wish I were. I mean, they never consulted me on that. They did not say, here are the textbooks from the kindergarten all, and here is the reform of the UPSC exam, and here is a reform of all the different types of curriculums. If they had it on the table, then in the second term, he could start off by implementing.
But will he? Because if he didn't do it in the first term...
So the material is not ready. The subject matter required, the research required, it takes years. You don't sit one day and just write up a book.
No.
So that has not been developed.
No.
And for that there is no excuse, because that is not necessarily policy.
But the fault is Mr. Modi, not Mr. Javadekar. I mean, after all, if you employ me, and if I have your backing, and the backing of your power and your, financial means and the backing of your manpower, I can do it. But unless I have your backing, difficult.
Well, the boss has to specify what your goals are. The boss has to say that's your goal.
Yes, but I don't think it is. It's like the gurus in America. And yoga in America. The gurus have dissociated it from Hinduism, from where it came. So the same thing happened with Mr. Modi. When he came to power, he wanted to take a distance from Hinduism, because he felt that he was labeled as a radical Hindu, a right-wing Hindu, a fanatical Hindu. So he wanted to take that distance. So his ministers also.
He wanted to become globally acceptable.
Yes, and that. I wish he was the Putin of India. Putin doesn't care if he's loved or not, but he's loved by the Russian.
Or Trump doesn't care.
Or Trump, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it seems that Modi got elected by the people who are very proud of heritage, identity, nationalism, patriotism, similar to some of these people in other countries.
Yes.
And to be successful, you got to cater to your base. You should never forget who got you there.
He has forgotten that. And education is so important. We keep telling about rewriting Indian history. This is a massive task,
Yes.
But it's there, like the Aryan invasion theory, which is the basis for every history book, whether Western or whether Indian, has been proved false long ago, And so Mr. Modi could have done that,
Right.
Rewrite the history books, rewrite the curriculum, take out the Aryan invasion theory. That's the first step.
Yeah. So, and the UPSC exam and the way they're training all these people. So also when we talked about constitutional reform, there's other things like Uniform Civil Code.
Yes.
There's things like Article 370.
So there's a third part, right.
There's all those, making, just like GST makes India unified from a financial standpoint. You also need to unify it in terms of the rights of people to go to any part of the country by land.
Yes.
I mean, a person from Delhi cannot buy land in Kashmir. So it needs to be unified in that sense also.
No, I mean,
and the Unified Civil Code, UCC, also is something along the lines of the GST in terms of culture and identity and equal law for everybody.
So maybe he thought that he would do that in the second term. I mean, I still have a lot of admiration and a lot of, respect, because I know that governing India is such a complicated and such a difficult, and it's a headache. But still, what he promised when he was Gujarat minister, when he campaigned for becoming prime minister, none of it has been implemented. And the Kashmiri Muslims, are all over India. They've taken over the souvenir trade in Auroville, for instance, which is such a far away place from Kashmir, and even far away from Pondicherry. They're there. They pay double, they pay double the amount of rent that other people. So they get the shop, they get the things. We don't see. I saw some articles you wrote about it. We don't see them selling anything, but still they survive. So we don't know what they do. They're all over India. But for an Indian, for a Hindu not able to go to Kashmir and do the same thing is totally unacceptable.
That is the land of Shiva.
Yeah,
I mean that is where Shaivism starts.
Yes,
I mean that is all these sacred rivers.
Yes, Mr. Modi should have done it immediately.
The whole Saraswati, Indus rivers and all that. So I mean there is.
It made no difference in Kashmir. No, Kashmir is 10 times worse than it was under the Congress. You know, what difference did it make that he made an alliance with the PDP, which is a huge mistake? What difference did it make that he went there and went on the Dal Lake? It made no difference. If he had implemented that, there would have been as much revolt that there is now. Kashmir is worse than than under the Congress. Many things are worse than under the Congress. The visas are worse under the Congress. Banking is worse than for a foreigner. Because I live in Auroville also. It's worse. It's more difficult. People get thrown out of Auroville for no reason because they do little business. He made some rules against missionaries and against NGOs, which are warranted. There are many NGOs which are hostile to India, and it was warranted. But the bureaucrats are applying it to everybody. The RRO, the visa officers in all the small places like Pondicherry, Chennai, they use it against any foreigner. Good people in Auroville who've been there for 30, 40 years are getting thrown out of India because they sold one shirt, sold one photo. He doesn't know that, but he doesn't want to know also.
A good friend of mine, Vladimir, lives
Vladimir
in
has been thrown.
He's in exile after living for decades in Auroville.
He speaks Sanskrit fluently.
He's one of the great Sanskrit scholars. I've done a lot of work with him. We're still collaborating.
Yeah, I got an email from him yesterday.
Because he got some...
He taught in Ahmedabad
Because
University.
he taught a small course somewhere.
Yeah, Ahmedabad.
And you're not supposed to get a job. And he did it, he was teaching Sanskrit. So they just applied this law against him and kicked him out. Now he's sitting in Finland or Norway or somewhere.
There's a Brazilian lady in Auroville. She speaks fluent Sanskrit. She knows the Vedas by heart. She has 2 small children. She taught an online course to 6 Portuguese on the Vedas. She got thrown out.
If people lack depth of understanding and complexity, they can't figure out. They'll apply rules in a very simplistic way.
Yes.
And that's counterproductive.
Yes.
There's no simple commandments, do's and don'ts, thou shalt do this and not do that, 5, 10, 20 rules. It's not so simple in India.
Yes.
So you need people who are more intelligent. And so every ministry and every bureaucracy needs somebody who is trained in our civilization. There needs to be a civilizational expert, like there's a chief financial officer, there's a chief technology officer in all these organizations. There ought to be a chief civilization officer in every part. This would be one of my proposals.
Yes.
If you ever get a chance.
Yes, we should
that
get
we
a chance.
should. There should be a think tank that develops civilizational studies. That's a training mechanism that trains people at all levels from top to bottom, whether they are school teachers, whether they are judges, whether they are lawyers, policemen, media people, foreign affairs. And they ought to groom and train people who become chief civilizational officer in every single department.
There are enough people like you. So many people, around the world, are lovers of India. No, but Mr. Modi needs to call them. He needs to listen to them. So what I wanted to say also that the third important reform is decentralization. India has a very, very centralized government. Again, it's a Congress inheritance. In Delhi, up there in the north, where you have no touch with what's happening in the center and the south, it's also a British legacy. You need to decentralize the power in India.
And the PMO's office got a few hundred people deciding everything in one.
Yes. So it's still a Congress, it's still a Congress. And it's no fault of Mr. Modi. He has to function in that system. Unless, he breaks it, and shatters it, So the way, in my opinion, the way to break that bureaucracy hold is to move out the capital from Delhi to the center of India. I know it's a huge task, but if Mr. Modi does this, he will break the bureaucratic hold. Otherwise, I don't think he can break it.
But if he relocates from Delhi to some location
Indore, Pune,
Okay, but then if he takes the same bureaucracy, it doesn't change. Nothing changes. So you need to change the human resource how they're selected, how they're trained,
Sure.
how they're
No,
managed.
that's also very, very important, and this is where you could bring a huge contribution. You could make a huge contribution on that. But the reforms are so wide and so enormous that some divine grace needs to be there. We need the divine grace.
So, but the first prerequisite is to have a stable government, strong, stable,
Yes.
single party government comes
Yes.
back.
Yes.
And then all these things are possible.
And Mr. Modi to become a little more ruthless, little more ruthless. He has to become, either Putin or Trump. And the fourth reform, of course, is the judiciary in India. Because we've seen that many issues which are very crucial to our hearts, and to Mr. Modi's hearts, like the Ram Mandir or the 35A or Sabrimala, and the Supreme Court, they have no clue, these people.
They are not well educated on the subject matter. And I've always said, like, suppose you were discussing an issue with nuclear policy, then your job is to get nuclear experts to brief you. If you are discussing you're adjudicating a case on a very complicated medical issue, you would get medical experts to come and give you the background.
Absolutely.
You have to do that.
Absolutely.
Because being a good judge doesn't mean that you know all the topics in the world. So, but in this case, issues concerning Sabrimala, for instance, required a good understanding on what is deity, what is this temple all about.
And people to go there, I've been there.
And so the Supreme Court didn't bring in Shankaracharyas or people like Sri Sri or people who are modern gurus or traditional gurus, anybody. They should have brought in a panel of experts and asked to be educated.
Of course.
And they should have kept them as advisors on the case.
You're talking about humility. You're talking about humility.
Yes, that requires humility, knowing that, okay, we are the Supreme Court judges, but we don't know certain things.
But they don't have that humility. I think the Chief Justice is the son of a Congress, as Chief Minister. Gogoi. He was the Chief Minister of Assam for many, many years. I know him. So his thinking is, whatever. He has that atavism. He thinks like that. He's not going to think, Hindu, and he's going to think.
So the 4 areas of reform. One,
constitution.
Second, education.
It is the decentralization, the
bureaucracy,
reform of the bureaucracy and of the Indian civil service. And the fourth, of course, is judiciary.
Thank you for watching. You can subscribe here and also hit the bell icon to make sure you get notified. To donate, please click this button.